Anyway, you can start.
I've got a message to get rid of now. Oh, great. I can't get rid of this message. There we go. Okay, good. Yeah, you can use that mic if you want.
Okay, from here.
Yeah, it should pick you up.
Welcome, everybody. I guess welcome to the couple of folks that are on Zoom.
Layla.
Okay.
Yeah, that is somebody's microphone isn't muted
Oh,
though.
okay, so one of the somebody got their microphone on, we can hear you talking also. Tonight we're doing on how to use your camera to video and put together a whole video story. And Peter Charles has graciously come up with all his equipment, so it's a little bit different today on the setup. Not your typical Zoom type meeting, but it looks good, and Peter will be going through all the stuff. Peter's been in photography for a long time. It's been a long winding road for him. He started back when he was 8, using a Kodak Brownie Starlet camera. I don't even know if I've ever seen one of those.
I still got it. Doesn't work anymore.
Unexposed film was considered to be more valuable than gold, so it was common to go on vacation with a roll of 12 in the camera and return with 8 or so unexposed frames. I remember those days. Then you had the 12 to 24 months, then consumed with finding suitable reasons for expanding the remaining priceless frames so that the vacation pictures could be viewed. Obviously, not a process conducted conducive with developing photographic skills. In '69, he acquired his first adjustable camera using
Agfa Isolat.
Isolat 3 for the pricely sum of £6. So how much was £6 have been back then?
About $12.
About $12. Wow. Sure. Far from what cameras are today. Since then, the value of unexposed film has diminished. Started touring London with it. Learning how to expose film properly came from reading sheets that came with the roll 120 film. I think most of us learned that way. No meter, of course, just the sunny 16 rule. In '82, somebody dropped a Pentax K1000 in his lap, and off he went, blowing exposures everywhere. As now he had a light meter and trusted it. Once he got over that, he launched a semi-pro career with membership in stock agency plus corporate portraiture, corporate photojournalism, and environmental portraiture in addition to his street work. Medium and large format years soon followed, and he started to look for new ways of what he was doing. He transferred to Toronto, initiated a photographic hiatus that only came to an end about 15 years ago. He reinvigorated. He drove back into that landscape, agricultural, street photography, setting on the last of the 3. After retiring in 2011, he figured it's best to do something useful and started his YouTube video career, producing fly fishing videos to go along with his fishing pro staff status. He currently has about 730 YouTube fishing videos uploaded, so he's been kept very busy. And photography has led him to some interesting places, and the road is still going on. So, with no further ado, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If I'd known it was going to sound that long spoken, I would have made a shorter bio.
I don't want to miss anything.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Tonight, we're going to look at shooting video with our regular cameras. Rather than going out and buying expensive video gear, we're going to use what we already have, which also, I might add, even includes cell phones. So what I'm talking about in this video can go from cell phones all the way up. You can get a $100,000 red camera, or you can, use your cell phone. So we're going to go through selection of things that are going to be start off less technical, and as we're going to migrate to being a little bit more technical as we go on. So if at any point you want me to stop and you want to ask questions, go right ahead. I'm quite happy to stop the presentation and carry on. One thing I'll mention is that I did not go through Hollywood movies to try and pick examples. I picked examples from my own fishing videos. So I know you guys are not going to be, not all of you are going to be interested in fishing, so bear with that little bit. Ignore the fishing bit and look at what's happening in the video. We'll go with that. So the first thing I'm going to say, it doesn't matter if you're taking a picture with a cell phone of your cat doing something cute. Tell a story. I didn't put the video up here. This is just a frame capture of the video. That's my grandson, and he got stuck in the mud. So I did a whole video of him getting stuck in the mud and getting pulled out and going on the swings, and grandma taking him around and having a long discussion about goose poo, because that's about 90% goose poo where he's standing. So that is, the idea is tell a story. It doesn't matter how simple the video is. It doesn't matter if it's instructional. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a Hollywood blockbuster. Just if you have something to say, you will have an audience that will listen. If you have nothing to say, nobody's going to listen. So make sure you have something to say first. Come on, there we go. So every video that we produce should have an introduction, the body of it, which is the storyline, and a conclusion or an outro. And the reasons for this is if you don't have these things, and it can be incredibly simple, it doesn't mean it has to be something grand. An introduction tells the audience what the video is about. I mean, if you ever looked at a video on YouTube and have no idea where this thing is going, what it's about, even if it's just a title, I mean, nothing more than just Callum wades into some goose poo. That's all you need for a title to get that thing going. And you can also get, if you're talking about a proper film, you could get into character development and all that kind of good stuff. And, really set the scene, as they like to say. So it doesn't matter if it's really simple or very complicated, but you need an introduction. Now, you're going to have a storyline in the video. And as I say, I keep talking about cell phones. What did I do with it? I've lost it already. Even if you take a picture with video with your cell phone, you want it to have a storyline. You want a progression. So if you're doing a video of your cat doing something cute, there should be a progression in that video that shows the cat starting off, does something cute, and then ends with your conclusion where the cat looking at you saying, wasn't that cute? So you want that kind of progression. Again, if there's no progression, there's no storyline, there's no plot, there's no movement from A to B, it leaves the audience going, what is this about? What's going on? So you need that kind of logical progression, even if it's extremely simple. You don't need anything complicated in that progression. You just need something. And you have to finish with some kind of conclusion or outro. Otherwise, people are left feeling unsatisfied, like what's going on, what's happened. Ever watched one of those series on TV and they come up with a very unsatisfactory ending and all fans complain? This is the kind of thing. You're looking at a YouTube video and you go, it's over. What happened? What's missing? And that's because there was no ending to it. So when we get into storytelling, as videographers, filmmakers, whatever you want to describe yourself as, they have various tools at their disposal. We're going to look at some of these examples of some of these. The framing, we're as photographers, we're used to framing subjects. So this is going to be second nature to us. We've got close-ups, full shots, and insert shots, high angle, low angle. We do this already. We've got something called cutaways where we move to something else. We've got B-roll, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. Panning and tracking, rack focusing, zooming, which you all know how to do. So these are the things that you can use to tell a story. So for example, if you wanted to tell a story in a video about this gathering here, you might have a camera at the back that's wide angle and it zooms in on me as I'm starting to do something. So that is a way of telling a story about me. So here's a little video of mine, which uses a few of these techniques. So we've got the intro, which is using a high angle shot. So you can see the action, got a title.
Hi, Peter Charles here.
And then I
folks who
start
like fly fishing.
chatting.
And
This
let's
is
talk
a
about
close-up,
catching
and
panfish.
this
on
is
the
a regular
fly.
close-up,
I mean,
usually
it's
head
an
and
awful lot of
shoulders.
fun. And one of the
And
best
I'm
things
not going to make you
about
watch
it
the whole
is it's
thing.
not fussy about tackle. It's not fussy about anything. Shorter rods are usually better.
Oops. This is going to be a little bit of a problem because the mouse is so tiny on this thing.
Flies are very simple.
Okay, this is an insert
I mean,
shot.
Good old colorful wet flies we use in our trout
See?
fishing. You
Go
can use
into
those.
from my
The silver body
face
ones
down
work
to
well.
the flies.
Sometimes they
so you
want
can see
yellow,
what's going
sometimes
on.
take another color.
And
If
I
it's
let
got
that
some
roll
red
for a
on it,
little
it
bit
always
while talk as
works.
it goes.
Um,
But the whole
Also, you
idea
get into
is I don't
poppers.
just sit there and be a
Poppers
top
are an
of the
awful
head.
lot of fun
That's
too. Just get
boring.
really small ones.
So when I
And
want to illustrate
you know, you don't
flies, I
need
use
anything
a close-up,
fancy in the
insert
way of a
shot.
leader
It's
either.
basically a
I
close-up
mean,
of
your
an
old
object.
trout
And then
leaders
I
that are
also
getting a little
use
chewed out, use them
a
for
cutaway in a
panfish.
moment, which I'll show you.
You can
as it
fish
comes
off
along.
of a dock from the shore of a pond.
Pay
As long as
attention
you've got
to
a
the
bit of
audio.
casting room, you're
It
okay to
sounds
go.
pretty deep, pretty good.
They are an awful lot of
Especially-
fun. And
There's
the
no
only
speakers on
thing
this thing.
I would
Speakers aren't working.
suggest
It's
that
realized.
if you're casting poppers, you use a line that has a bit of a blunt front taper. There we go. Try and say that quickly. The blunt, anything you throw at.
I just got to try and find that cutaway here. Sorry.
Fly.
If I can't find it, it's all right.
Some if it's got first and later eat and fish off of. As long as you got
Here
a
we
bit of
go.
casting
This
room,
is the
you're
cutaway.
okay to go.
So what I did
They
was a
are an
cutaway
awful
to
lot
an
of fun.
actual scene of
And
me
the only
fishing.
thing I would suggest
So it
that
shows
if you're
what's going
casting
on.
poppers,
Okay,
you
we'll
use
move on to the next one. We're going to see if we can get some sound.
I just turned that up there.
Okay, good. We'll try that. So when I'm just going to look at the framing, the framing tools that we've got at hand, and we'll look at each one of these. We talked about the close-up, the medium close-up, which is more of the body, extreme close-up, which would just be part of a face, a full shot, which is the entire person or people, the insert shot, which we saw, which is an object, the high angle shot, which we saw, and a low angle shot. So let's look at some examples. The thing about the close-up is without a close-up in any kind of storytelling, and we go back to the cat video with your phone. You ever notice that people do phone videos, but they never get close to the cat? It's just a little blob in the picture. You know, they've got zoom, they can zoom with their phone if they wanted to, but they don't. So it's hard to really identify what's going on. You don't really get the full impact of what the cat's doing. It's because they didn't use a close-up. So it gives you the small details. It communicates what's going on, the emotions that people are feeling. It can help, you can use it to change pace in a scene. So in other words, the cat goes from doing something slow to doing something fast, you zoom in on the cat. And now you get that feeling of that motion and that change. So if you want to convey something important, like for example, if I was saying something grandiose, that camera in the back could zoom in on me, and now I'm saying something grand and wonderful. And then it zooms back out again when I'm finished. So it allows also the audience to see the character or the person from their perspective. So this is, I'm not going to play this too much. I'm just going to play it for a second.
get those big fish that really
Good.
are not
Good.
super active during the bright sunny part of the day.
So you can see typical close up, just head and shoulders. And it's the classic talking head that we get in TV.
Get those
TV news. Here's an example of a medium close-up, which is basically the waist up. And so, you know, you
Hi,
just
Peter Charles here,
on the
Books of
scene.
Life Fly
I'm
Fishing.
demonstrating a
And
rod.
today I'm out with
And
a new
one thing is that
Loomis
I'm my
NRX
own crew,
Plus
so that's a bit of a
8'6"
problem.
four
I
weight.
have to do a lot of my own framing I have to walk away from the camera and I'll look at the screen to see if I'm in it, you know, that kind of thing. This is an extreme close-up. So, you know, I'm
In
looking at
fact,
just
it's
my
going to make
eyes.
this job perfect, shall we say?
So, you know, you've got that just in the eyes, very tight in, see all my wrinkles. And, you know, you can actually convey something, so humor, anger, whatever you want to convey with a very, very tight close-up. And here's a perfect example of a full
Okay,
shot.
that's a simple little demonstration on how effective
and
this
it's
G Loomis
also a handle
NRX
shot as well.
10-foot
So-
four-weight
and you
Euro
can
nymphing rod actually
see
is.
my surroundings, my environment. And it gives you a good example when you've had two people having a chat. You could have a medium close up with the two of their heads on either side of the frame, pull back to a full shot where you see both of them standing there. You see this done in movies all of the time. And there's the a typical example of an insert shot. So I put that into the
Yes, I do.
frame, so you can see the flies I'm picking out. And here's a high angle shot. And the thing about high angle shots is it's good for showing the environment that you're in, that the person is in. So you can set up like on a bridge here. I was on a bridge looking down. You could stand up on a chair, a step ladder, just change the view, look down. It gives perspective of what the person's environment is like, but it also does something else. It's also, they're in a vulnerable position, and the camera is in the dominant position. So if you want to convey dominance, you'd use a high angle shot to do that. So in this particular case, I've got this fellow picture. So that's, and you notice my framing, putting him down here so I can see the fish up here. Those are the types of things you would do with that high angle shot. If I was down at his level, I wouldn't get nearly as good a view of the action. I can get his rod in there, the line. You can see a lot of what's going on because it's a high angle shot. So I use high angle shots not for that dominance thing. I'm using it for perspective to show the environment the person in and show the action more efficiently. And here is a low angle shot. And I'm doing this for instructional to show a casting fault of bending the wrist too much. But my problem is if I do this straight on, which I could do, people tend to look at my face and they don't look at my wrist. So this way they look at my wrist and not my face by using a low angle shot. Now I just turning around to turn off the camera at this point. Look at how intimidating that looks. If you're sitting down low, you know, it makes you feel uncomfortable. If you're looking, if you're down below, you're looking up at that. It makes you feel like the person is dominating you. So it does both. You can use it for an unusual perspective, or you can use it to convey domination. Now, cutaways, I showed you a cutaway before. Here's an example, simple cutaway. And I say, okay, we're going to move over.
Okay, here, let me show you a view down the creek.
Screen. And so you're moving away, and then I can come back to myself and continue talking. So that's the kind of thing you would use. If you're talking about something, you can cut away to that thing. So the people, while you're talking, the people can see what you're talking about. So for a perfect example, if you were doing you're talking about your favorite old antique car, you could be standing there talking about the car, and then you can cut away to the car, and then you can cut back to yourself. That's the type of thing. And you can do sneaky stuff with this, by the way. We'll talk a little bit about editing. You could shoot all of this stuff after the fact. You could do the head and shoulder shot, the talking head shot, do the whole thing, and then do these cutaways and just drop them in on top afterwards. You don't have to do them at the same time. And now B-roll is an interesting thing. B-roll is basically stock footage. And I'll go out with the camera and a tripod, and I'll do something like this. And this is just, I'm stood up on a bridge, and I'm just taking a picture of the screen. I'm zooming and I'm panning and moving. Just that will go into my stock library. And when I need to show a picture of a screen with certain characteristics, I can pull that out and use it. So I could use that as a cutaway for video that I make a year from now. You know, and that's B-roll. It's just stock footage. And if you're on a shoot with a professional cameraman and they're not actually shooting that moment, you'll often hear the guy say, I'm just going to go off and shoot some B-roll. So on the fishing programs they have, if you've ever seen the New Fly Fisher fishing show, I know the guy who's on there, Bill Spicer, I know the guys involved. And they said the cameraman just wanders off and shoots B-roll. So when they're putting the show together, they have all this extra footage that they can put in here and there to illustrate things. Now, panning and tracking is actually moving the camera and videoing while you move the camera. So panning is just simply moving the camera. Tracking would be the same thing, except you're tracking an object. So in this particular
Okay, the creek is
image,
relatively
I'm,
shallow up there, maybe a couple of feet deep
panning to
and
show
faster moving.
how the
And
creek
now it
goes from a
slows
flat,
down and
shallow
it gets much
to
deeper
deep pool
because
and
off to
back,
the left,
talking
we have
about
a
the fish
very
doing things.
deep elbow
If there was
pool.
a canoe going down there,
And this
and I
pool is
followed
a
the canoe,
perfect
I'd-
place to shelter very
But you
large
can see
grounds.
panning, I'm just
Uh,
slowly
This
following
is
the
quite
current
deep,
down, then
it's
I'll come
quite
back
large,
up.
and it's
You
got
won't see
lots
the
of
whole
structure
thing, it's not
inside of it.
necessary.
And so
But
what
you
they would
get the
do is they
idea
would move
is
up
you can move
to
your
feed
camera
into the
on
shallow
tripod,
water,
and that's why you
and
want a
they
good
into this
video
current
tripod.
flow right
That's a
here.
good cheap one.
and they could
That's good
feed
for this
through here
purpose.
without any
But a
problem
good
at
video
all.
tripod
And
allows you to
if
make those
they saw
smooth
something
panning
threatening,
moves.
they would just simply
So you can
slip
move
down the
tripod
current
without any jerky
into the
motions.
deeper water,
Yeah,
and they would be
and,
perfectly safe. And I've
You want a
actually
nice
seen,
smooth motion with that. You can also pan in software. I'll get into the resolutions in a little bit, but you can shoot in a large resolution like 4K and then edit down to 1080p, and that gives you lots of room to play with. So what I've done is in here, I've got a stationary camera. I can't pan it, but I
To
want
get
to
an idea how
show
far that
a
was
lure
going,
back.
that I actually had to stop
So I'll
the
pan it
flight
in
of the
software.
lure, or else I would end up in that weed again.
So what I'm going to do is show you the lure.
So I'm gonna go in a
backwards,
little
and I
bit
need
different
some room
direction.
behind you to show that.
Just pay attention to how I get the lure straight behind the rod tip before I make my forward cast.
A slow motion it too. Again, in slow motion. See the graphic to show the lure. And that panning in software allowed me some room behind me. So when I set that shot up, I had a very wide angle shot and basically zoomed in software to me and then just moved that frame around. So you can pan by moving the camera, or if you've got enough resolution, you can pan in software. Now, rack focusing or pull focusing is a very common thing that you'll see in movies where they will go from one person to another. So for example, I could be focused on you and then focus on Tony and you go out of focus. So here's what that looks like. So I just used two pictures set up on my bar. Did I go off? Come on. There we go. Oh, the video's not working. Thank you.
You get an idea how far.
Here we go. And I'll drift out. See, this one goes out of focus and that picture goes into focus. So that's pull focusing or rack focusing. Now, I did that with a manual lens. I did that with this lens here. So what I did was there's a distance scale on this lens. And so I knew the distance from one photo to the other photo. The camera's on the tripod. I'm not even standing behind the camera. I'm actually going, okay, I had to go from 5 feet to 3 feet. So I've got it here, I go 5, actually 3 to 5 it was. So I went 3, I just turned to 5. And that's how, if you ever see focus pullers on a movie set, that's what they're actually doing. They know the distances and they're just going from one distance to the other. So that's why you'll see a lot of manual lenses being used in video, because you have things like distance scales that you can actually use. So this is another kind of pull focusing. And again, same lens as this one. And I'm just going to, it's out of focus, then I go into focus. Now, you notice the picture moves. That's a problem with the lens. I didn't move the camera. That's called focus breathing, where the focal length is actually changing. And that lens might also be slightly off in terms of its collimation as well. But when you're buying lenses, like, where's my other lens? Okay, doesn't matter. You're buying a camera like this, that's primarily a still camera, you can get into a lot of problems because this is a compromise. Focus breathing is one of them, where when you're focusing, you're actually changing the focal length. So when you go from out of focus to in focus, the image is actually getting bigger or getting smaller. Now, the next one, remember correctly, is, I'm hoping you can hear this. This is going to be with, this is the manual lens zooming. So it's very easy. It's nice and smooth. I'm just zooming in. I don't get any focus shift, which is important. That's one of the features you want. So that was very simple. Now I'm going to zoom, do the same thing with a autofocus lens, and I hope you can hear this. Come on. Okay. Can you hear that? This? No, this is not, these speakers not really working well. Do you see the picture flicking backwards and forwards, going in and out of focus? What you're hearing, that hiss that you're hearing. See if I can crank it up here. That hiss is actually the optical image stabilization system in the lens. Now, when we're holding the camera, we don't normally hear that, just because you hear it, but it's going through the frame of the camera and into the internal mic of the camera. And so when you're using an autofocus lens and there's optical image stabilization in it, you're going to get that noise, and that camera makes that noise too. When it's when the optical image stabilization is on and I'm using the internal mic, you'll hear it. And the other problem you get into is you saw the autofocus going in and out, and you saw the exposure flickering. I mean, when you're zooming with a autofocus lens, you've got a lot of automation that's going on because it's not mechanically coupled. And so it's not necessarily smooth. And that's why you'll see a lot of lenses these days being sold where the manufacturer's talking about them being suitable to video. So this is the kind of things they're getting around. So I'm going to get now into the technical part of the video itself. What is the video itself? And you see that clapperboard? In the old days when they did using film, the audio tech would be off to the side with his, somebody have a boom mic over the actors, over the talent's head, and there'd be an audio tech with headphones on and a recorder, and somebody would get up in front with the clapperboard and go whack. And when the editor gets the audio footage and the video footage, the film in the editing room, you can see by the smack of the clapperboard, he'll both hear it and see it, and he knows how to synchronize his audio and video. We got it made in the shade. When you take video with one of these things, it automatically synchronizes it for you. So you're with video, we have both the audio tracks and the video track synchronized together. So it makes our life easy. Now, the thing is, video doesn't matter if it's old film or digital. It's a series of still images strung together. So if I'm running, it's like dunk, 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 dunk. It's like one shot after another. It's burst mode. We have all our burst modes on our camera. Video is burst mode, continually going, right? So it's a series of frames. So if you actually have video software, you can, my video software, I can hit my cursor key, go one frame at a time. And you can see each individual shot as you move through. So it's, a lot of people think it's like one continuous collection of images going through, but it isn't. It's 30 or 60 distinct images per second going on. So each image we term a frame. So, and you can do, you've heard of people doing frame captures. It's one frame that they grabbed out of the video and turned it into a still photo. If you have a video camera, a real video camera, and you take a still with it, all you've done is do a frame capture from the video. And we have something called frame rate, which is the number of frames per second that the camera records. So it could record 30 frames per second, 60 frames per second, 120 frames per second, for example. So in the old days, film was very expensive. So if they used a high frame rate, like 60 frames per second, I mean, they could have built a camera 50 years ago that had 60 frames per second. They did. But film is expensive. And the more frames you have, the more expensive it is. So what they found was 24 frames per second was the slowest you can go, and the human eye cannot pick it up. That they don't see any stuttering or juddering going on. It looks continuously smooth. So 24 frames was the slowest. And you'll see if you pick up this camera turn it on, go into the video menu, you will see 24 frames per second is available as a choice. Unless you have a specific reason for using it, don't bother. I mean, there's no reason to use 24 frames per second these days. It's a legacy thing. And unless you really want it to look like an old cinema shot, don't bother with it. So how video works, a camera like this has a mechanical, well, I'll better use this one, better choice. This has a mechanical shutter and it has an electronic shutter. And we're used to mechanical shutter. We're used to hearing that clunk when we press the shutter release. The electronic shutter is used for video because the mechanical shutter on these things is just not fast enough the way it works to be able to work with video. Plus you'll be hearing this thing with like a machine gun, which we don't want. So how this works is it does an electronic readout that uses the electronic shutter of the camera. And how that works, you see that green line here? That's one scan. So it scans a line that goes to the next, scans that line, goes to the next, scans that line, goes to the next, keeps going till it gets to the bottom, and then it goes back to the top to the next frame. So it does a complete scan, dumps that out to your SD card, then another one dumps it out, another one dumps it out. That's how it's shooting video. So your electronic shutter on your camera is doing all the video work. Right now, that camera that's shooting me, the electronic shutter is doing all of the work. Now, there are two types of frame rates in video. One's called interlaced, the other is progressive. We're only going to be talking about progressive. It's the only one you need to know about. I'm just going to mention interlaced once because you might run into it. Interlacing is what we used to do in old tube TVs. When you got an image sent to you from your cable company on your old standard definition tube TV, it was interlaced, which means it would scan make one scan of every odd line, and then it do a second scan of every even line to create a full picture. So you can see here, it do the odd lines, then the even lines to produce a full picture. So that's interlacing. And the only reason why you use interlacing is if you don't have the processing power to do progressive, which is one picture. So what progressive is that right off the bat, the full picture. And it doesn't do this into odd and even scanning. So if you see, when you're going through the menu of your camera and you see one that says like 60i, that's interlaced, don't bother using it. Because unless you're using a really old camera, you don't need to use interlacing. It just slow, it's just there, again, a legacy thing because of the lack of processing power. So, as I say, the frame rates, 24, which is legacy. 30 is typical, which we use, most people will use 30. It keeps your file sizes down. If you use 60 frames per second, you're making your file size bigger. 120, often with a lot of cameras, if you go to 120, they dumb down the quality to handle the 120. So most people are going to use 30 unless you are going to be doing slow motion or covering a race or something like that. So, and progressive, the P stands for progressive, which means it takes the entire image every frame. So a little bit of history. Let me get some water here before I go further. You'll see that our frame rates are 30, 60, 120. They're multiples of 60. And it's because our AC coming out of the wall is 60 cycles per second with the old term, or 60 hertz. So that's why we have our 30 frames per second in our old tube TVs. It was based on our power grid working with 60 frames per second. So again, you look at the menu in the camera, you'll see 24, 25, 30, 50, 60, like what's going on? What are those others? Well, the power grid in Europe is based on 50 hertz or 50 cycles per second. So they make their frame rates a multiple of 50. So over here, we're going to work on frame rates based on multiples of 60. So when you're looking through your camera and you see those choices for 25, 50, just ignore them. You don't need to use them. That's for Europe. So when camera manufacturers make these things, they put everything in there. They don't say, well, we put only some for North America and only some for Europe. I mean, it won't bring your video to grinding halt if you have to use 25 instead of 30, but it creates some interesting problems. If you put it out to somebody else who runs it at 30 frames per second and you've recorded at 25, it actually will slow the image, the video down, because it has to put an extra 5 frames in there to turn it to 30. It actually slows your video down. So that's why I'm saying be consistent, stay with the multiples of 60. Now, one little funny little quirk is in the European system, they had room to put in the color information when they went from black and white TVs to color TVs. We didn't. So we had to reduce the frame rate slightly to give us some room, bandwidth to put the color information in. So you will see 29.97 and 59.97 frames per second instead of 30 and 60. And it's because of that problem with the TV color signal. So you can see in here, you might see 59.97 or 29.97. Just stay with 30 and 60 and ignore them. And if you shoot at 30 frames per second in your camera and you put it in your software and your software wants to run at 29.97, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. It will. It's only a factor is if you had one camera shooting at 29.97 and another at 30, or the audio was done at 30, and then you try to merge it into a really long shot, you'll find over time that one will get a little slower than the other. But it takes a long shot for that to be noticeable. So just stay consistent is all I'm going to say. So here are the resolutions. You hear people talking about resolutions. Standard definition is what our old TVs were. The aspect ratio was 4:3, and it was 640 by 480 pixels, which is VGA. VGA standard. If anybody was in the computer business like me when the old 14-inch monitors came out or 12-inch monitors came out, that's what they were, 640 by 480. Then we get into high definition, which was 720p, and then full definition, which is 1080p, and then we get up to 4K, which is much bigger again. And now we've got 6K and 8K. I'm not bothered talking about that because that's an expensive camera to get 8K. And it comes with a lot of limitations. So here's the issue. As you go up in resolution, your file sizes become larger. You're going to run into hard drive space problems. I've spent a fortune on hard drives because I'm running right now at the house. My total is 1632, about 58 terabytes of data space in my hard drives now. Crazy. You need larger and faster memory cards. You've got to be careful. If you got the 4K, only certain memory cards are going to work. So you need the really fast ones. And your camera has to be powerful enough to manage it. If you're not, for example, you run 4K on that, it crops. So it already crops at 1080p a bit, and now it crops even more when you go to 4K. So you start paying penalties because the camera doesn't have enough processing power. So it says, oh, we do 4K, and then you run 4K and you find out you get a crappy result. And and also the other thing too is when you're editing 4K software, you better have some horsepower in your computer. 1080p, pretty well any computer is going to be able to handle 1080p footage, but you get 4K, you better have some horsepower in your computer. Now, here's some problems we get into which don't exist with real video cameras. I used to use Canon video cameras. I stopped using them for a variety of reasons, but when you go to cameras like this, you get in, or worse, one of these, you run into some severe limitations. And some of these are being dealt with. So I'm mentioning these, some of these are starting to turn into legacy issues, but if you've got a camera that's 2 or 3 or 4 years old, you'll definitely run into them. First off, the SD cards that we have in these things are formatted by what's called FAT32, file system 32. 32-byte file system, 32-bit file system, I should say. It's common on computers years ago. Most computers these days are 64-bit computers. And the problem with a 32-bit file system, it can only handle a file that's 4 gigabytes in size. It can't handle anything bigger than 4 gigabytes. And video files are big. So you can hit 4 gigabytes. This camera, the recording at 1080p, stops at 23 minutes because it hits 4 gigabytes and it stops dead. So if you are using 1080p, you've got 23 minutes. If I use 4K and this camera will shoot 4K, it stops after 8 minutes. So if you're trying to do a continuous video of something, and so you're going to be running this camera for an hour, you want to run a camera for an hour to record something, 23 minutes is going to stop. Now, there are cameras that will create another file and then another file and another file. It'll keep creating files till you run out of card space. That camera will and this GoPro will. So what it will do is when it hits the 4 gigabyte limit, it creates a new file. So when you look at your editing, you'll see a bunch of 4 gigabyte files, which are actually one video. Like I say, real video cameras don't have that problem. They've got this issue licked. But for our still cameras, it can be a problem. Now, the other problem you get into when you're dealing with 4K is it draws a lot of juice out of your battery and your battery heats up. And there's thermal limits in the camera and the camera will shut down. You'll be running this for 10 minutes and all of a sudden your camera stops. And you might have to wait half an hour or put it in some place cold to before you can use it again to shoot more video because of the thermal limits in it. So be careful if you want to shoot 4K that your camera will support, will allow you to run without running into temperature problems. Yeah, there we go. Now I'm going to get into audio. And I really want to stress that audio is not the video's poor sister. It's as important as the video. If you have crummy audio, people won't want to watch your video. And you can get into a lot of problems with audio. And for us as still photographers, we can get around the video part quite quickly. We can sit down and learn the video part and you'll get that because you do a lot of things, similar things with still photography. You're just adding the movement component to it. But when you get into audio, unless you're an audiophile and you've got $100,000 worth of audio gear at home, it's just going to be a new game for you. So what we have to do is develop our hearing to hear what's going on the way we see what's going on when we're taking still pictures. So the first thing I want to point out too, very strongly, these cameras have internal microphones, and this thing has an internal microphone. And they're only useful for either emergency purposes or what we call scratch audio. And scratch audio is audio we're going to throw away after we finish editing. We use it for synchronization purposes only if we're shooting like 3 or 4 cameras. We'll use the audio in the camera to do the synchronization, but we don't use it in the actual video because it's awful. So as I say, you never want to use a camera microphone unless you're really stuck. I have had good luck under the right circumstances. I had this camera in a chest mount, and because the microphone is right there, and I'm talking like that over it, it actually came out pretty good. But that's a rare situation. We're not normally walking around with the cameras like this, are we? Shooting video. The audio on these things is brutally bad. And what I have to do, here is it. What I have to do when I'm out on the water with my GoPro, because the audio is so bad, I wear this hat. And it's got a microphone right here. I've got my earpiece so I can hear what's going on. I plug that together and I record my audio in here. Now this thing is recording audio too. It's crappy. And then I synchronize this with that, and my audio on the water now sounds good. But if I use that GoPro to record the audio, you hear the whole time. It's just really bad. So the first thing is if you're going to get into audio properly, keep in mind you're going to have to invest in a microphone of some description. You don't have to spend $5,000 or $6,000 on a microphone. A couple $100 will get you a very good microphone. But if you're going to get into audio, into video, and you want good audio, don't rely on the internal mics. The other thing I want to point out is I've seen this multiple times, and I'll talk about it more in a little while, is the dynamic range of the microphones on these things is very poor. They're optimized for the human voice at a normal speaking level. And I'll talk about this in a moment. If you had an operatic soprano hitting a high C, you try to record her voice with this, talk about garbage. She sounds like a screeching cat. And it's the crappy mic. So types of microphones. Okay, first one, this is a lavalier microphone or a lapel mic or lav, people call them. They clip to your clothes and you plug into a wireless unit. I'm on a wireless unit right now. Or you could run a cord out to it, to a camera. So that's one choice. We have condenser microphones. I don't have the condenser one here. I'll show you I'll have pictures up. I'll put up pictures up in a moment. We've got shotgun microphones, and that's a shotgun microphone right there. It's also a condenser microphone, but it's a particular shape because it has a different pattern of what the sound it picks up. We have dynamic mics. This is a dirt cheap one, but you know, you've seen singers when they're singing into this, or announcers when they're talking. And you've got ribbon microphones. You've seen those, 1930s, 1940s vintage, when they got that cage microphone. That's a ribbon microphone. You can still get them today. So there's the lavalier. They're good for picking up the voice of the wearer. But for example, if you and I were having a conversation, my voice would be fine, but your voice, you wouldn't hear very much at all. So it's only for the wearer. So if you want to do an interview using lavalier mics, both you have to have one. And be careful of the rustling against clothes, the wind, bad for lavalier mics. That's why the lavalier mic on this one's under the brim of my hat. As I turn my head, the mic goes with me, so my volume is consistent and is protected against the wind. With this lavalier mic in this position, if I turn my head to talk like that, my volume will drop. So there are limitations with this. It's good for doing what I'm doing right now, but it does have its limitations. Condenser microphones, you see them in studio situations, and they come with a shock mount, and they also usually have these pop screens. It's to deal with what they call plosives. You're sending a blast of air at the mic, and the mic picks it up. So you put the pop screen in front of the microphone to prevent that blast of air from hitting when you pronounce the letter P. So these condenser microphones require a pop screen, and you see one in the picture right there. And they usually come with a mic, and this is a shock mount. So if somebody jiggles a desk, it doesn't transmit to the microphone. Now, the good thing about condenser mics is that you can usually use them at some distance. So if you and I were 3-4 feet apart, we could have one condenser mic between the two of us, and would be able to record audio just fine. Shotgun mics you see them used in news cameras. You see the guys with the big cameras on their shoulders, what they call ENG cameras, electronic news gathering. They'll have the big shotgun mics on them. They project straight ahead. They look straight ahead, and they have good distance. So if I had a shotgun mic on you, you could talk at about 10 foot, and you get a perfectly good audio at 10 foot.
Well, there was a comment that they couldn't hear me, and I was behind them. That way.
Yes. Yeah. I'll show patterns in a moment, what they look like. Now, I want to talk about this lady here. She's a singer in one of my favorite metal bands. She's a classically trained singer. She's using a dynamic mic. So the feed from that mic goes into the mixing board, then out to the PA system, and it also goes to a recorder. which then is used for professionally recording a live performance. So you can hear the live performance when she can not only hit a high C, she can go over that. And when you hear it professionally recorded, beautiful, rich, full tone, and you hear it recorded in one of these, as I said, screeching cat. And that's the dynamic range problem. And the thing about dynamic mics that she's using, you notice singers are like this all the time. They're meant to be used very close to the mouth, like this. You put it here, the volume really drops off. So you see people using them all here, and you notice there's no pop screen because it's built in. So these have their pop screens built right into the microphone. So if you're going to use a dynamic microphone, you have it right close to your mouth. And some singers, they're like so close, you think they're going to take a bite out of it. You can wire, they can be wired. This one is wired. The one I have at home for my studio is wired, but the one in this picture is wireless. So she has one of these on her back. So that way she can connect to the mixing board. Wireless, you can move around the stage. And there's the ribbon mic. It's the old form of microphone. It's got a ribbon that goes in either side. They're perfect for having a conversation. You put the ribbon mic in between the two of you, and you record equally on both sides. Very, very good. And it has a reasonably good range. Keep in mind, microphones are just like flashes. You know, if you use your flash at something close in, nice and bright, well illuminated, go back 3 feet, it drops off, go back another 3 feet, it really drops off. Inverse square law, for those of you who remember that from high school. Mics is the same way. The further you go, the more drastic the drop off. So these are the patterns that you get when you go to buy a mic, and you need to be aware of what you're going to be doing with it. So shotgun mic is this pattern right down here, and that's, you know, focused straight ahead, a little bit to the side and a little bit to the back, but it's focused straight ahead. A lot of the lavalier, like this one here, is the omnidirectional. So it just picks up equally all the way around, because the reason is they don't know how it's going to be oriented when you clip it to your shirt. Typically, these are cardioids, depending which one you want. And so it takes the sound from the front, not the sides and not the back. A little bit from the back in some of these other patterns. And a ribbon, the ribbon ones are figure eights, and you can also have figure eights in a lot of the condenser mics too. So you can actually set, sometimes they'll have settings. So you buy a condenser mic and you'll see that it says Omni, figure eight, you know, cardioid. That's what they're talking about, these different patterns. Now you can connect a microphone with, you know, a little 3.5 millimeter jack like this. I don't have an XLR jack with me. I have them at home. XLR jacks are big, robust, professional ones. You know, you can swing from one of those things. They're so strong. Also, you can use USB. A lot of microphones these days will plug into the USB port of your computer, which is handy. So if you're going to be going directly from a microphone to a computer, you want a USB connection. If you're going to a camera, you want one of these 3.5 millimeter. Unless you're going professional, then you'll have the XLR jacks. The thing to keep in mind, this is so critically important, is microphones come in two flavors, powered and unpowered. And this lavalier mic is unpowered. So when it plugs into the camera, it gets its juice from the camera to run the microphone. This is unpowered. But that shotgun mic is powered. There's a battery in it. And there's batteries in this. So there's a battery in that receiver and a battery in this transmitter. So these are powered. So that is actually sending a powered signal to the camera. And so is that shotgun mic. What makes this so important is that a lot of cameras don't have the power to run the microphones. It's called phantom power. And And it's hard to know, it's often hard to find out whether your camera has phantom power or not. And when you connect them, let's say if I connect this directly into the camera, and then I record some audio and I get a lot of, what's going on is the preamp in the camera is, because there's no power in this lavalier mic, the signal is weak. So it's boosting the signal to try and make up for the weakness. And that's where that hiss comes from. We'll talk about that in a few minutes about what that really is, what's going on. But if you're connecting a lav directly to a camera or something like this directly to a camera as an unpowered microphone, and you're hearing a lot of hiss, it's because there's no power in the microphone and this thing is not producing enough phantom power to run the microphone. And also you can get into cable length problems too. You might find the camera is okay with a cable length like this, but when you plug it into something like that, it doesn't have nearly enough power to drive it on that length of cable. So as a consequence, now you've got this horrible hissing sound as your preamp cranks up to try to make up for the weak signal. So that's why when you look at those, that's a camera shotgun mount, shotgun mic, I should say, for a camera mount. It's got a hot shoe on it. All of them are powered. They've all take batteries for this reason. You can't rely on the camera having enough power to drive the microphone. So when you are buying a microphone to go on the camera, make sure you're buying a microphone that's built to put on a DSLR or a mirrorless camera. That's a hot shoe one, because then it'll be powered. You won't run into the problem. You have to worry about it. If you're going, pardon me, if you're going wireless, same thing. The wireless will provide power. Oh, I also almost forgot. The wireless mics, you get into range problems, and it varies on the brand. And sometimes just turning away so your transmitter is on the other side of your body from your receiver, that's enough to screw it up even at this distance. So some of them will say, oh, you have 150-foot range. Well, it's line of sight, no interference, perfect conditions, and this is lined up perfectly with that. As soon as you turn or you've got obstacles or things in between, that range goes right off a cliff. So unless you're spending like $700-800 for a wireless setup, you can get into range problems. And this is about the range I work at with a wireless mic. I don't work at much more because you get zzz, 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 when it's running out of range. So that's something to be aware of with wireless. They're not, the claims they make are bull. Now, some things when you're editing your video, you get this waveform underneath, which is your audio. And you can see these little yellow peaks here. Those little yellow peaks are warnings that we're starting to clip the audio. And it's the same concept as clipping in photography. When we clip the highlights and we lose the data, yellow is a warning. If it goes red, you've lost it. You have no data there when it's red. So if your volumes are too high, you get this clipping problem, and you can see it in the waveforms. So that's one of the useful things for waveforms. It's very useful for editing, very useful for showing your volume levels, and very useful for showing clipping. And you can adjust this. If I just grab this line and pull it down, I'll reduce my volume and the clipping will disappear. So I left that in there so you can see the clipping problem. Now, distortion is this is where it gets a little confusing with audio and in video versus still photography. What we call distortion in audio is what we call noise in photography. It's the same issue. And then what we call noise in audio is background noise, like the hum from this this cooling system. That's what we would consider noise, background noise. So distortion is a hiss, and it comes from driving your equipment too hard. And like I said, if you have an unpowered mic and your preamp in your camera is having to crank up to make up for the weak signal, you get the and it's simply because you're driving the equipment too hard. And clipping is a form of distortion. So again, it's a loss of data, loss of signal. And one of the things is you've got manual mic levels and you've got auto mic levels. One of the very annoying things about auto mic levels in these cameras is if it all of a sudden goes silent, the camera thinks the signal's dropping and boosts the gain on the preamp, and then you get the hiss. So you find, get used to, if you're going to work with this a lot, get used to using the manual mic levels in your camera. You'll save yourself a lot of grief. Now, the other problem we get into with what we call noise in audio, which is background noise and hum, we become oblivious to it. It becomes white noise to us. If we were in this room for a few hours, we wouldn't hear that hum at all. What's going on? But your microphone's picking it up. So that's why we really have to pay attention to the noise around us. Fluorescent lights are bad for putting off a 60 hertz hum. Electronic equipment can put off a 60 hertz hum. And of course, you got wind and you got people knocking their microphone, all these different problems. So I've got this. I hope I got enough volume here for this. I've got, can you get the volume up just a little? Okay. Okay, we're just going to do this. I've actually went down to my basement and recorded some. I'm just going to let this run so you can hear it. And I recorded some audio problems.
Okay, let's look at audio noise. And right now I've got my fluorescent lights on and they're humming like mad. So I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to turn the volume up a little bit so you can hear what a 60 hertz hum sounds like. And it's annoying. And you know, you can remove it in software, but be aware that if you've got fluorescent lights or electrical equipment going, you're going to get a 60 hertz hum from our power grid. So listen. Now, I've told my wife that I'm shooting a video downstairs, but it's about noise. So I've also told her, just do whatever you want. I don't care. Make noise. Because that's the next thing is background noise. Now, I'm just going to go over there, take the headphones off, going to go over there, turn on my dehumidifier for the basement, and we'll listen to background noise. Can you hear that? I certainly can in these headphones. That is the dehumidifier going. It's amazing how many people shoot video and are totally unaware of the background noise in their environment. It's because it becomes white noise to us. Like when I'm working in the basement and I'm doing, doing some woodworking or whatever, repairing something, I don't hear it really. I don't pay any attention to it. So when we're listening to the audio coming into our headphones from the environment, so you shut up and listen. And then you hear all that background noise and you go, oh, that's not a good idea. So let's turn that off.
I've also turned off.
Okay, now what I'm going to do, there's still a little bit of 60 hertz hum and my wife is still working in the kitchen. So now what we're going to do is we're going to crank up the gain on my mixer and you'll hear what distortion sounds like when we push an amp too far for our equipment. So you can hear her TV upstairs because I cranked the gain up on the mic, and you can hear the hiss from the distortion being created by driving the amplifier too high. And it's no different from us with our still photography, and we've underexposed the scene, and then we crank up the ISO to try and deal with it, or we crank up the brightness in post to try to deal with it, and we throw in a lot of noise as a consequence. So it's the same thing. If you over amplify the signal, you end up with what we call noise in still photography, or distortion in audio, same thing, but it's not good. So listen once more. Yeah, not good. So be aware of your ambient noise levels or background noise levels. Be aware of 60 hertz hum that you get from electronic equipment, electrical equipment. You can get it from cables crossing each other. You know, things like ground loops. Oh, there's all sorts of ugly things that can produce 60 hertz hum. And then you get distortion because you're driving your equipment a little too far. And one of the biggest problems from driving equipment too far is having the mic too far away from the subject. And then you got to crank up the gain to be able to hear what they're saying. So be aware, audio problems. There's lots of them, and they can be a pain to figure out. So the cleaner your audio is to start, the happier you will be.
And I will mention something I forgot to mention earlier. When we talk about distortion, it's internal to the system. So in other words, all this cabling that I got, the computer, the cable, the camera, the microphones all cabled together. Any distortion we get in there is internal into that system. When we talk about noise, it's external to the system. So it's what's going on in the room around us. So noise is external, distortion is always internal. So I'm going to move on to post-production. I'm just checking my time. We're not doing too bad. When it gets to getting into your editing software and you dropped your movie into, let's say, iMovie, you've got iMovie on your Mac, right? There's lots of amateur level editing software out there, and there's lots of pro level editing software. When you make a movie, please edit. Reduce it. There's a lot of useless space when we shoot a video. We go out and shoot some cat videos with our phone, and I guarantee you there's lots of useless footage in there that's telling nothing, doing nothing. Get rid of it. Don't include it in your video. Edit, edit, edit. And when you think you've edited enough, edit some more. I'll turn an hour-long piece of footage into 2 minutes to get my point across, because I'm talking about outdoor fishing video. And I'd say use editing software that's commensurate with your abilities and your intended use. So going out and buying pro level editing software is probably overkill for 99% of the people out there who are doing video. Something like iMovie and Apple does a wonderful job for straight ahead, simple editing. So you really don't need to get into something like Final Cut Pro 10, which is what I'm using for my stuff. There's the learning curve jump from my movie to Final Cut Pro 10. I've been using it for how many years, and I still feel like I don't know about 50% of it. And I will say that it's important, our editing skills are as important as our shooting skills. Because often if you've got good editing skills, you can often recover a bad situation. You know, you made a mistake and you're good at editing and, you know, flip things around and all of a sudden it's working. Like one of the things I've done before is I've had a problem, let's say my hand went in front of the camera or something like that. But I was saying something important at the time. I will let the audio track go, but I'll drop a cutaway on top of that. So you don't see my hand, you see the cutaway, but my voice is still going underneath. Little things like that you can save with good editing skills. You not only can make a better story and condense it and make it more interesting to the listener, but you can also get around problems. So today we've got what's called nonlinear editors, NLEs. And what that means is you can just pick things anywhere and drop them in. In the old days, when you're working with a roll of film or videotape, you had to scrub all your way through to find things. And you had to deal with them in one long line. Well, we don't have to do that today. We just like grab a still shot, throw it in there, grab another clip from here, throw it in, grab some audio and chuck it in. You just put it, it's just like baking a cake. So I use Final Cut Pro 10. There's 4 other expensive high-end, and there's others. This is not an exhaustive list. This is more of the amateur level stuff. And so, you know, Adobe Premiere Elements is an amateur level video. iMovie, Wondershare. I've used iMovie and Adobe. I haven't used the others, but they exist. So editing requires us to understand the concept of a timeline. And basically, it's where your video starts, where your video ends. Now, you could stack things in it and do all sorts of neat stuff, but it's a sequence. And so you have to visualize it when you're sitting down with your editor that you've got this sequence that you're putting in. As I say, you can add clips, you can add audio, special effects, all sorts of stuff. So you have to be able to arrange clips around and make them logical. Cuts and transitions, where you want to transition from one scene to another. If you've ever watched YouTube, you get these very annoying jump cuts. Drives me nuts, where they want to cut something out. So the guy's talking, blah, 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 and he said something awkward. So they just cut it out of the video. And so he's talking, blah, 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 and it's like jumping around. It's really amateurish and it's lousy. So if you're got any kind of talent for managing this sort of stuff, use me able to do transitions that actually add interest. You notice, by the way, my transition when I got in off my chair and back on my chair, it's called flow. I flowed in and out as I moved away. It wasn't just a chop. You can overdo transitions, by the way. When you get the software, it's got bazillions of neat transitions, and you use them 2 or 3 times, and you're going, "Oh, that's cheesy." So yeah, you use the simple ones. Graphics, titles, they work, and managing the audio, dealing with the audio, that's important. So getting into the cameras. I talked a lot about the cameras already, but I'm going to get into it hardcore now. The thing is about these things, they are a compromise. They're still cameras that are capable of shooting audio. A dedicated video camera will beat these things any day of the week. But for us as still photographers, we're not going to run out and spend $5 grand on a video camera just to shoot a few cat videos. So if you want, these are perfectly adequate to shoot video as long as we're aware of the limitations that come with them. So there are some still cameras on the market that are known to have really good video capability, to the point where professional photographers are using them instead of real video cameras because they're a lot cheaper. Panasonic is known for making some excellent video cameras, still cameras that are video cameras. But we do get into problems. So if you're working with an older camera, one of your problems is going to be rolling shutter, because we're using the electronic shutter, and I talked about the readout of the sensor. Because the readout speed is slow, you get, when it's moving, you've ever seen those old footages where the car is leaning as it goes around the track, so there's a lean to it, or if you've got a vertical line, the vertical line does the Watusi as the camera pans. That's rolling shutter, and that's because the readout speed is too slow in the electronic shutter of the camera. So if you're using an old still camera shooting video, you could run into that problem. You saw the erratic autofocus and auto exposure when I was doing that sample on the picture. Big problems with our autofocus lenses if they're not built with video in mind. That's what I say. It's a lot of the zoom lenses that we got out there, if you try to use them like a zoom in like a video camera, you run into these issues. Another problem is a lack of control. Manual control, because I try to shoot everything on manual. That camera and this camera have great manual controls, except when you're in video mode, it insists on having auto ISO. So I can have manual shutter speed and manual aperture, manual white balance, all that kind of good stuff, but it's still, the ISO is going to be auto. So in effect, it's still running on auto all of the time. I'm controlling some things, I can't control everything. This, I control everything, no problem. So that's what you want. You want to be able to manually control, unless you're shooting your kids running around the yard real quick when you grab your phone. But if you're trying to do anything serious, you want to do it on manual. A lot of the cameras don't have a lot of audio capability. They don't have the ability to manage the audio. They don't have the jacks. You don't have headphone jacks, so you can't listen to what's going on. Like that doesn't have a headphone jack. So that's why you saw me trying to get audio out of here, the audio out with this thing, and I was hopping around to find where I could hear it, because there's no headphone jack on that thing. And there are various tools that high-end cameras have that cheap ones don't. Things like Zebra, which looks at our exposures, vector scope, waveforms and vector scopes. These are things that pro videographers use. If you're not going to go to that level, it's not something to worry about, but be aware that if you wanted to get into it, these cameras like this one doesn't have it, even though it's a relatively expensive camera. So there's something called log recording, and I'm not getting into the logs that much, but it's basically flattening the dynamic range. And so your result is very flat, but the dynamic range is huge. And then you can grade it in post to bring everything back, and you retain the dynamic range. Because the dynamic range of this sensor is about 12 stops. An old film camera will be about 7 stops. The human eye is about 24, 25 stops, which is one of the reasons why we have problems judging exposure, because our eyes see far more than the camera can. So log recording is a way of expanding the dynamic range by flattening the exposure curve, because our exposures are actually a curve, they're not linear, and it turns it into a linear exposure. But then when you get into post-production, you have to reverse that. So if you're not going to do any serious video, that doesn't matter to you. The other thing is, you heard the optical image stabilization noise on that lens. What you want really is 5-axis stabilization in the camera itself, in-body image stabilization. You won't get the noise usually, or you might get a little bit, but it won't be bad. And it's more suitable for video because you've got in video, you've got more roll, what they call roll yaw problems, whereas with hand holding, we're jittering, but you have other problems with video. So it's 5-axis stabilization instead of 3, which is usually in the lens. So if you're looking at image stabilization, you want a camera where that's built into the body, not the lens. I would turn the image stabilization off on the lens in some cases. And the other problem you get into if you're relying on autofocus, a lot of cameras do a lousy job of tracking. So if I'm using this one and you're walking towards me or walking across and I'm trying to track you, the autofocus, I could be bang on you and the autofocus going zip, 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 zip. So, when you're going out to buy a camera for this purpose, read the reviews when it comes to things like tracking and the image stabilization, because that becomes important. Now, you can help yourself out. Obviously, you can get a good tripod, but if you want to use, handheld stuff, you can use something like this, which I can put that camera on here. And then, that gives me a certain amount of stabilization. It works to a reasonable degree. You can get relatively cheap steady cams. You've seen them, they're like a pole. You can get really ridiculously expensive ones. You can get cheap ones that do a sort of decent job. And you notice this thing has a battery grip on it. If you're going to shoot a lot of video and you're not going to be around, like that one's running on AC. That's plugged into the wall. I'm not running on battery. But if you're going to be out somewhere for a long time, video chews through your batteries fast, so it helps to have a battery grip if you're going to do a lot of shooting without charging. And I've talked about the FAT32 cards being a problem, about having limits on your recording time. Battery heating up is another one I mentioned. The battery life itself, which I just talked about. Here's another one. Get a load of this. European Union tax law taxed video cameras differently than still cameras. You paid a high rate of tax on the video camera. So to get around that, define what's a video camera, they said if it shoots more than 30 minutes continuous, it's a video camera, it gets taxed at a higher rate. So our cameras, and this one is one of them, comes with a 30-minute limit built in to match the EU tax law. Now, the EU have fixed that, but that legacy problem still is in our older cameras. If you buy a new camera today, you don't have that problem. Now, what I'm doing on that camera, see this cable coming out? That is coming out of the HDMI out from that camera. I'm not recording in that camera. I'm recording in the computer. So I bypass all of these problems simply by going from the HDMI port out to the computer or to a recorder. So by using the HDMI out from that camera, I don't have to worry about the EU. I don't have to worry about batteries. I don't have to worry about FAT32 file limits, nothing. I can record for hours and hours and hours straight. Camera doesn't heat up. Very simple. So if you're in a studio, if you saw my studio set up downstairs in my basement, I've got 3 cameras. All cameras are hooked up to a recorder from the HDMI out. I don't use, and all of them are on AC. So I'm not using the internal batteries. I'm not using the SD cards, nothing. I bypass all these limits. So when we get into lenses, we talk about focus breathing. As you focus, your focal length shifts. The inconsistency and the noisy, jerky operation of zooms, because the zooms are often not mechanical. They're fly-by-wire. And like, you know, for example, this one here, perfect example. It's fly-by-wire, it's powered. You're not mechanically coupled. And so it becomes problematic to get smooth operation. Zooms at a variable apertures are a real pain if you're trying to go with manual exposure and then you zoom and your exposure changes. And that's why this lens here is a constant aperture f4. And the other problem you get into is when you're trying to focus with autofocus lenses. Again, it's fly-by-wire and it's not linear. So if you try to pull focusing, it's a mess. So what you'll see a lot of videographers working with old film lenses for this reason. So, I mean, there's tons of them around. They're dirt cheap. I've got the one that's sitting on my main camera in my basement. I got for $40. It's an old Minolta 3.5, 24 to 35 zoom. Perfect. You get this, you get these adapters. This one has an adapter right here. And, and you also want a 2-ring zoom, not a push-pull zoom. So you want, one ring for your focus, 1 ring for your zoom. Because if you use the push-pull, if you tilt your camera, they sag and you've changed everything. So if you're doing a high angle shot, down goes your zoom. So I said, I'm talking about all these limitations, but the truth of the matter is, for average video use, all the cameras we own are perfectly adequate, even the phone. You can turn out a good product just for the phone if you do good, if you're aware of the things that are going on. And some of the problems I mentioned, like, for example, if you're never going to do log recording, who cares if your camera doesn't do it? If you're never going to do any serious work where you need a vector scope, well, then who cares if your camera doesn't have one? So it's, you're going to use the camera that's at the level where you're going to be working. So buying a lot of capability, the guy says, oh, the reviewer says, oh, it shoots, S log and F log and, got vector scopes, yada, yada, and you're going, I'll never use that. Well, don't buy the camera. You're wasting your money. So the conclusion, and we've talked about all this stuff, but the important thing is to go out and try. So if you've got a camera with a video mode, go out and use it. Instead of going out and just taking pictures, actually go out and try to use the video and see what you get. And then throw it, your laptops probably have editing software built into them. Throw it in the editing software and see what you do with it. It's actually it's a load of fun. If you think still photography is fun, when you get into video, you're really having a good time. I mean, you want to shoot yourself sometimes with the audio problems. It's great. And don't forget, as I say, concentrate on the story. The technicalities are the easy things to learn. You'd be surprised how quickly you adapt to the additional complexity of video over still photography. But learning to tell a story and learning to frame that story and use creative tools, that's where the real fun is. And that's where the challenge is as well. Because as still photographers, we're used to, not incorporating motion and not incorporating audio. And when we put that together, there's an awful lot more fun to it. And don't forget, edit, edit, edit. So there we go, folks. Give it a try. So any questions at all?
Time would you spend in post-process compared maybe to what you would do for still?
Oh, easily 5 times, 10 times. When I'm not doing super Photoshop stuff on my images, but you've seen my black and white stuff. 10 to 15 minutes on an image. If I'm doing green screen, multi-camera green screen, that could be 5 hours for a 4-minute, 3-minute video. So, and that doesn't include the shooting, that's just the editing.
That's about an hour.
Yeah, yeah,
We had a movie shoot done at our house, and it's amazing, because I think it's what, 2 weeks for an hour show.
yes, yes.
So it takes a lot of time.
Yeah. With the amount of footage I shoot compared to what I use. The only times where I shoot footage and it's about the length of the video is where I'm doing video in my studio downstairs. It's like I might shoot 10, 12 minutes of video and turn that into a 4 or 5 or 6 minute video. But I've shot maybe double. But if I'm out on the water, it's easily 20, 30 times the footage on the time I'm shooting versus what I'm actually end up using. I mean, I shot an hour of footage the other day and I used 1.5 minutes. So,
So where do your videos generally end up? Like, where's your end product?
YouTube.
YouTube.
Yeah.
So any keys to how a YouTube video should be to keep some maximum impact?
I would say it depends greatly on the subject and the audience. But if you're talking simple stuff, I'd say 5 minutes max. You know, you've got about 5 minutes to hold their attention. And you can see in your YouTube statistics, your audience retention. And you can see it, you lose some right at the beginning and then you keep most of the rest and then at the end. And you can see that audience retention.
It's like watching a Zoom meeting.
No, but it's true. I will skip through a YouTube video so I hear the piece of information I'm looking for.
And the other thing you get into too is if you're dealing with a technical subject, you could get away with a half hour or an hour because the people are there to learn and they're the interest of your audience. And I hate to put it this way, but let's say the intelligence level of your audience is up here compared to somebody who's watching cat videos. They want 30 seconds of something to make them laugh, which is fine. I watch cat videos too. But, you know, if you were going to go out and watch a video, for example, on how to edit videos in Final Cut Pro 10, the introductory video, maybe half an hour. And you need to watch the whole thing because you can't skip ahead to get one piece. If you're starting out, you have to watch the whole thing. So some of my videos, the more technical ones can be 15, 20 minutes. My fly tying ones are usually 5 to 10 because people will go through the whole thing. I've got a couple of videos that are on classic ties that are like half an hour long. On the water stuff, I try to keep under 10. But if it's like, but that's a technical subject, I'm explaining stuff. If I was doing just entertainment type videos, 5 minutes. You're not going to hold them longer than that.
It's like showing people your pictures too, right?
Yeah.
You get bored after so many.
Yeah.
No one likes looking at a hole and I just slide through it.
No, especially you come back with 4,000 pictures, right? You start.
Oh, I had this experience when I was a teenager. I had a new girlfriend, brand new. She took me home to visit her family. And I sat down on the couch and mom and dad sat beside me and they got the family album out that was about this thick. And the girl is sitting there horrified, goes, what are parents? And I'm sitting there like, what am I supposed to do? Oh, that's cute. Oh, that's nice. And they're telling me about Aunt Matilda and Uncle Jerry. And poor girl, she was just horrified at what her parents were doing. Yeah, so yeah, that's an important one about attention span. The problem for us when we're editing, I know I said edit, and edit some more, is we look at our video and we're so enthralled with it. We think, wow, this is really cute. I remember this bit, I remember that bit. But the audience was never there, so they've never had that experience. They're coming in cold. Yeah, so we want to put everything in there because we feel everything's important. But the reality is only a little bit of it's important. You got to cut out all the frills and go with what really counts.
You know, editing has been, I used to edit film.
Mhm.
We had to cut splice.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fun.
Sitting there with the viewer rolling like this.
I'll cut there.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a lot of respect for old film editors. That would drive me nuts.
Can you quickly go through your setup here? Like, I see that your shotgun feeds into that little hub.
Yeah.
for lack of better, And then you get the wireless device that talks to your
Yeah.
your lapel mic, and then that feeds into the little USB-C to USB 2 hub there.
The key bit is that little piece up there. That's an HDMI to USB converter.
Sorry, that's a what?
HDMI to USB converter.
Oh,
It takes an HDMI signal and turns it into a USB signal.
oh,
That's how you put HDMI into your computer. This HDMI, this part is HDMI out
okay, yes,
to the TV.
okay.
To get HDMI in, you cannot use your HDMI port, you have to use a USB port. So
Okay.
that's what that little beastie does. Okay, now up here.
But, okay, so how do you get the audio injected into the HDMI?
Okay. This is just a little mixer, little analog mixer.
Yeah.
And it has two channels, a right and a left. So I've got that plugged into the left channel. I've got this one plugged into the right channel. So it's stereo going to the camera. So you can see it's plugged into the camera here. And then that audio and video is coming out of the HDMI port. So that way I've got, you know, and I'm not using the SD card. There's no SD card in that camera right now. I don't think so. I might check that out. But I don't need it. It's not recording. It's just sending HDMI signal out. Mine is doing that.
So what app are you using on your iMac or your MacBook Pro there to record with?
I just use, if I just wanted to do a straight recording right now, I just use QuickTime. Okay, the Mac video software.
Yeah.
If you look, there is in the menu, there is start recording. So you can start, oh, I'll put it up here. I won't be able to see it because it's too small, unfortunately. Where is my, I can't even see it on here. Oh, Lord. Yeah. There it is. I'm not used to working so small. We won't be able to see it anyway. Yeah.
You could just, you're sharing the screen, right?
Yeah.
So if you go share screen. Or stop sharing and then go to your,
Oh, you're talking about in Zoom?
yeah. Oh, you're doing, you know, you.
I'm not doing Zoom. That's the problem. So anyway, I can't really see it on here. It's too small. You've got in the menu, you have the ability to start a recording and QuickTime. And so it will actually pick up this signal. And the only thing that you have to be careful of with Macs is the HDMI in has audio, so it will record audio and video together. But if you try to do a capture of an audio, a video that has audio, it only captures the video. So in QuickTime, you can record HDMI in, which gives you both audio and video. But if you try to do like a screen capture of video, okay, it only gets you the video. Windows will get you both. You can get software though to let you record both. So what I do when I'm doing this stuff, and I have a computer on in my laptop, one of my old laptops in my studio, I've got HDMI out and I've got audio out to be sure I don't have problems.
Right.
So.
You're recording separate.
And I have a Atomos recorder. The HDMI is going in and the audio is going in and it's recording. It's so the synchronization is happening in that recorder. It just gets around some of the issues that you get into if you're trying to do something complicated. Like I'm running like when I'm doing that, I'm running 2 cameras plus a computer, and it's all got to merge together.
So Peter, are you up on the different cameras and what they're offering now, like different manufacturers?
To a point, yes.
I know like Sony, they have, their newer cameras seem to be more video.
Yes, yes, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know like this one that I have here, the 7R3.
Yeah.
It has two slots, one for dedicated to video, one for still,
Yes,
or you can make them both, whatever you want.
yes, I can do that with this one. This is dual slot. This is an XT2, so it's a few years old, but it's dual slot and I can direct one to video and one to still. The lot of the improvements you're seeing in cameras is in the autofocus tracking in video mode, which is garbage in a lot of cameras. I mean, the tracking is great for still photography. So your subject's moving towards you, you take a shot and you get a beautiful, focused picture. But when you try to do that in video, it's, zipping in and out and looks awful. So that's one of the the advancements they've made with the cameras. Processing speed is another, which you mentioned 8K, that comes from processing speed. You need the video and the processing speed. One of the things you have to be careful of when you're going to 4K and 8K is some cameras will use the entire sensor when they're doing 4K, and some of them cheat and they crop down. So you're starting with a full frame camera and they're doing 4K and it's cropped you down to an APS-C. So it's there are all these different things to be aware of when you're going up in resolution. You can start to lose depending on the camera, and the higher end the camera is, the better it's optimized for video, the less that's a problem. But Sony, for example, a lot of the models will crop the 4K.
It'll crop it at like 60 frames a second, it won't crop it at 30.
Yeah, exactly. Or an older one just cropped all of them. And then, then you've got different frame rates, get different crops. Exactly. And so it depends on the camera. The Canons, the Canon mirrorless are getting a good reputation for video. Yeah. Nikon's coming along. Fujifilm is finally making cameras that are more oriented to video, the XH1, XS10, and there's rumored XH2 coming, which are video oriented cameras.
What's going to happen to still photography?
Oh, we're still gonna have it. Yeah, we're still gonna have it. They'll always be there.
There's problems with just asking what you gotta do if you're shooting bright sunlight, right? You're doing stills, you crank up your shutter speed, away you go. You don't necessarily have that option.
No,
Video.
no.
Use an ND filter or something to-
That's right. I didn't get into the nitty gritty of like what shutter speed to use with frame rate. I mean, we can do that in a workshop. I kept it the technical level at a reasonable level. I didn't want to get too techy, but you have less exposure options with video, so you use ND filters to deal with it. Another thing you can do is if you've got the ISO range, you can back your ISO down. There's different ways to handle it, but you just can't crank up your shutter speed to deal with it. Because if you're shooting 30p, you're going to be shooting at 1/60th of a second or slower.
Yeah, I guess that's the other interesting question I have to know. Just ask here, but we'll ask the members. Anybody interested in doing a workshop with video?
Because what we'll do is we'll get into the technical nitty gritty like that. And how to deal with these situations. What I've got in mind for a workshop, if we do it, if we have enough people, people will get up into groups of 2 and shoot a video. Go take out 5 minutes, plan out a little video, go shoot it, and then we'll throw it up on the screen and take a look and discuss, what's there, what we could do, and all that kind of, get into. And if what you want to see is you want to see some mistakes, you want to see some problems, and you can say, okay, this is what typically happens. How do we deal with it? And that sort of thing. Have a little bit of hands-on. People bring their cameras and actually try to shoot video with the cameras. That's really the idea with that, is to actually have that hands-on opportunity to shoot some video.
Has anybody tried their cameras? I never have. I might have a video camera.
More than I want.
Is that?
More than I want.
Have you?
Yeah, it's part of school.
Oh, you gotta do it for school, yeah.
Yeah. So there's video is a lot of fun. I got into it when I retired because I didn't want to sit in my butt and stare at the TV. And so,
So you go out and you shoot and then you sit on your butt and you edit.
exactly. But at least I got lots of exercise tramping around the bush with 30 pounds of equipment.
I got into because I like putting slideshows together.
Yeah.
Right? That's why I did it. And, people say, you want to do what?
Oh, yeah.
It's too much pressure.
No, no, good Lord, no. Run screaming from the room. Now, it really is a lot of fun, but it is a little overwhelming when you get into it. I come from a technical background, so I jump into these things like it's like I'm a dog with a bone, you know. So I just love chewing on them. But it's not always fun for some people. The learning curve can be a bit intimidating. That's why I say just go out and shoot. Don't worry about, you know, the technical side. Learn to tell that story, and then we'll worry about putting the technical stuff together. Because telling the story is surprisingly difficult. You know, if you don't do a good job of that, you end up with a very pointless video. No matter that, perfectly technically crafted pointless video. You know, and it's much better to. I'd rather have an interesting video that's a little technically off than the other way around.
Yeah. What is your comparison like? I know they both have different purposes for you, but video compared to still.
I use video more for instruction and for entertainment. I've also found it easier to earn money. My still photography, I used to earn money on my still photography until I sort of had to hit the gag reflex with that. I couldn't take it anymore. And now it's just, you know, here and there. Like I do way more video than I do still. You've probably seen on my Facebook pages, on our Facebook page, I should say. Well, I'm only posting a picture every month or 2 months because I'm shooting 99% of the time, I'm shooting video. Now, yeah, I'm still not, you know, totally retired from fishing. I was a pro fly fisherman for quite a few years. I'm not completely disengaged from that, but at some point I'm going to get totally disengaged, at which point probably my video gear will all go for sale. And I'll be done with it and I'll go back to shooting stills. Because really, as long as I'm tied up into the fishing industry, like you saw some of those were promo videos for rods. And that's some of the things I do. So, so I do promo with Loomis and Shimano. So I'll do promos for them. And I was with, until they changed hands, I was with Airflow, which is a fly line company. So Sims, which does waders and jackets and stuff. So, you know, I use their products in the videos. Sometimes I feature them, sometimes the video is about the product. So there's that part of it. So there's a business component to it as well.
I guess for still photographers, so it'd be more for if you're doing weddings, right, or special events. Stills and video.
Yeah, because I've seen in the old days, a guy would put a video camera up on a tripod, point it at the altar in the church and just let it run, and then moved around with the still camera, and then would edit the footage down to something usable. But it would just video, and the camera would never move.
Nowadays, you can spend up to $20,000-$30,000 on it.
Yeah.
And you're during a wedding, if you got video.
Yes. You can spend as much as you want.
No, but I'm thinking the average, so $5,000, $10,000.
Yeah, something in that ballpark. Yeah. Yeah.
I think the video for myself would be very interesting, although the mic and the sound may not be as important to me, which is probably a good thing. But I shoot macro insects.
Yes. Yes.
So to give that life, it's great to have that image in it, but you've done. I hate
Yeah.
to-
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing you could do too is you can do B-roll for audio. So you could, like if you're doing insect photography in your house, you've taken the insect on a twig and you brought it into the house in your studio and you do video of it. I did just show me this for as an example. You could go outside with this little Zoom H1 and record ambient
Right.
and then play and put that on your bug video. So people think it's outside.
Right.
Things like that. Yeah, but I mean, that's a good, you raise a good point though. You have to have a reason for doing it.
Mhm.
So you have to have this part of telling the story. You know, if you don't have a reason for doing it, I mean, you could have a really cute pet and think, you know, I want to really put the stuff up on YouTube and have some fun with it. And it's perfectly valid, perfectly good. But all right, TikTok, yeah. Yeah, TikTok is all the silly stuff, yeah. Everything shot like this gets me. Everybody shoots video like this with their phones. They've never heard of doing this, you know.
Problem is with your phone, when you do that, though, you have to have software to turn it around.
No, if you go like this and then start the recording, you're fine.
You're fine, but if you don't,
If you start the recording like this, then go like this, you're screwed. Oh, my darling wife is not a photographer, and she's, when I've been on the water, she's done stills for me, and she loves the burst mode or the motor drive in the old film days. And so she just, you know, bang, 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 bang. And you know, we edit down to half a dozen that we can use for promo purposes. And one day I said, come out with video, do some video for me. So she's shooting video like this, and then she goes like this. Because I told her, I'm always telling her I want vertical and horizontal, portrait and landscape. So she sure.
they get a good variety of which shoot.
Yeah, so, yes,
You mentioned earlier a bit about green screen
yes.
videos. I'm familiar with pictures. I created it. How different is to use the green screen for videos compared to green screen in photo?
Well, it's the same thing. You've got, if this is the green screen behind me, this wall is a green screen. I'm taking this camera would video me in front of the green screen. And I do this in my studio. The green screen's behind me. I do my whatever I'm doing. I'm shooting that. When I put it into software, I use something called a keyer, which removes the green. Okay, so it blocks out the green, so it's not there anymore. And then I put another clip underneath it. So if you saw it in the timeline, there would be the green screen footage, and there'd be another clip under here, and it appears behind me. So if you look at some of my videos, you will see that I pull myself on, I'm like big head and shoulders in the middle of the frame, and there's something behind me, and I'll pull myself down to the corner and I'll let it run behind me. And so it's what you're doing is you're doing it in software. So you're using two clips. You're using the green screen clip, and you're using the clip that you're going to put on the green screen afterwards, which is what they do in the movie business. So so you're getting one of these, you know, sword fights in a castle while it's being done in front of a green screen, and the castle is CGI'd in afterwards. You know, so yeah, green screen is fun. Lots of problems. It's another hair-tearing adventure, but when you get it right, it's good. And it adds a lot of interest to the video, is that you can, you know, cut in and out of regular footage. Like I've got two cameras running plus the green screen, and I got the computer going. So I've got two cameras, the computer, and the video is on the computer. So I'm talking to the camera and I'm stopping the video. So the video behind me that they'll see in the actual footage on the green screen stops. And then I point at it. I go, okay, that's what I'm talking about right there. Don't do that. It doesn't work. And I'll put graphics on it. And then so the graphics will appear behind me. So I've got my video running on my computer, and then I can start and stop and while I'm talking about it. And when you're looking at my video, it's appearing where the green screen is. And I make myself little in the corner. So oh, I can't read this thing. It's too tiny. I was going to say I'll pull up one of my videos with the green screen, but it's fun. It's, as I say, it comes with a whole share of headaches too. But when you get it working, it's cool, and it's a way to add extra interest to your video. You know, people really cotton onto that stuff because it's neat to watch, you know, something happening behind you, and you're talking about it. Or with me, I'm playing with my video. I've got the video running on my laptop in front of me, and I'm stopping and starting and talking about it, zooming in, doing all kinds of stuff.
Think about it, you shoot a lot of videos, right? And then
Yeah.
you do all that stuff in your studio. You don't even have to go to another country. You already had it all done, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I try to shoot as much stock footage as I can when I'm out, and I can throw that stock footage on a green screen. You know, I've got, let's say I'm talking about a particular feature in the river. I go through my stock footage. Oh, there's that thing. Put it in the green screen. So I can actually talk about it, and I can use my mouse and indicate I'm talking. It's that seam right here, and I'll enlarge my mouse, my cursor, and I'll just go see that seam. That's where you want to be running your nymph, right down that seam. And, it helps to, you know, visualize when I'm trying to describe something that's a bit nebulous, like what's a seam in a river. You know, what's that mean? Well, I can actually throw it on the green screen and say, there it is. That's what you're supposed to be looking for. And makes it easy to show people how to identify, you know, for example, just what you call reading water, how to read water. You can talk about reading water till you're blue in the face and people will leave the room going, what was he talking about? But if you show it on the video, it's really easy. So that's why I'll use green screen exactly for that. I'll have the thing going. So when they're looking at my video, I'm down in the corner and I've got my mouse showing them where all these features are. So you can take it as far as you want, really. My wife sometimes she looks at the studio downstairs. You're buying another what? Yeah, my Zoom H1 is not working anymore. I have to get another one. That much is that. So it's comes with its own challenges. It's a lot of fun. You get a lot of problem solving. Like this hat is my own little invention. And a video guy saw that and he thought, that's bloody genius. Because now no matter where I turn my head, volume is always consistent and that's out of the way from the wind. And it's not rustling against my clothes. I'm not banging it, you know, and this attaches to the recorder that's in my pocket. Crystal clear audio everywhere I go. And I can monitor it with this little thing. I just have to remember to shoot me from the other side. So they don't look at that. But, you know, things like, you know, using a dead cat for, this is a windscreen to keep wind noise out of your microphones. That's what the foam is for, but this does a better job. Having good headphones so you can hear what you're doing, that kind of stuff. So it's, you know, you don't need to spend a lot of money. Everything I'm using is amateur grade gear. I don't own a single piece of professional grade gear. You just need moderately priced. You can't go super cheap. Like I tried to go really cheap on wireless. It's awful. So I had to go to about a $300 unit to get decent. Some things are hard to cheap on. Microphones, you know, this is about an $80, $90 lav. You know, you can get them for $20 off of Amazon with the garbage.
It's like any equipment, right? You pick and choose.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't have to go stupid with microphones. You can get a good dynamic mic for $150, $200, and it'll do a wonderful job. Same with condenser mics. Yeah, start around $100 and go up to $700. That will do a perfectly good job. You don't have to spend a fortune. The cameras, as far as the cameras are concerned, I find DP Review does a good job because they've got a dedicated video guy. And sometimes he talks about stuff that's irrelevant to us, like if you're never going to do log shooting, you know, ramble on about that. You can close your ears for that bit, but they're quite good at assessing the video capabilities of cameras, because he does all his shooting with a Panasonic. Yeah, Panasonic GH5, I think he uses. He's quite impressed with the video capabilities of that camera. But as I say, Canon, Nikon, Sony's always been there with video. Fujifilm has come a long way. They used to be the worst. Now some of their stuff is really good. They only lag really in autofocus tracking. So if you're not doing sports, where autofocus tracking is important.
Is there a particular lens you would like, focal length that you would recommend for meeting with it? Or just,
Depends on your purpose. The only thing I would say is read the reviews to see how they are with video usage, because a lot of the lenses out there were never designed with video in mind. So they come with focus breathing, noisy image stabilization, the focus in that is not linear, all these different problems that you don't care about with still photography, but it's a big deal with video. So I would say it's more important to know that the lens that you're buying, it does a decent job of working in video. You don't have and that's one of the things they cover in DP review. He'll talk about focus breathing. He'll talk about problems with tracking and problems with, rack focusing is one of the worst things to do with modern lenses. It's brutally hard compared to this, which is easy as falling off a chair. I mean, rack focusing on this, I know the distance, 15 feet to 12 feet, okay? Boink. I've just rack focused. Very simple. But when you're trying to do that with the lens, is that the zoom on that one? Or no? Okay, that prime. But if you try to rack focus with that, I mean, you would have to sort of. Now, some of the cameras are really smart. They're built in now. You can do it with software. You can assign your end and your start point in the camera, in the menu of the camera, and then you just start it and it'll pull focus for you. But there aren't too many of them out there. Holding focus with a lens like yours would be tough. So a lot of the stuff, if you do not need autofocus, you're often better getting an old film lens. And the thing is that they're so cheap that you get one.
got a bunch of old lenses. So, and I've got the adapter to put
Yeah.
the aim on the E.
Yeah.
So.
You may find out that one or two of those might be really good. When it comes to zooms, the only thing I say, make sure it's a 2-ring and not one of the push-pull ones. But apart from that, I use them all the time. My main camera in my studio works like a bloody charm, because I know it's 1 meter from the film plane to my nose, so it's 1 meter on the. I never have to worry about focus at all. But I say when you're dealing with and one of the problems you get into with autofocus, when you are both the crew and the talent, one of the problems you get in with putting your autofocus lens to manual focus, okay, imagine I'm going to be sitting in this chair. I'm going to have to sit here and try to put this thing in manual. This is an autofocus lens. I'll put it in manual focus. I'm going to try and manually focus on that spot, right? And then I'm going to go sit there. And it's a pain in the butt. Whereas with this lens, I just have to measure the distance from the film plane to the chair, set it on the lens, it's a focus. So when you're working by yourself, that's when you find the autofocus lenses, when you're trying to use them in manual mode, really get to be a pain in the ass. It's when if you're just the camera person and you are working with the talent, it's easy. But when you're not, when you're doing both jobs, it's tough. So, and that's what I do in the field. I'll put that on a tripod and you see it has a selfie screen on this camera. which is really important if you're going to be the talent and the crew. You have to have a selfie screen to be able to see that you're, the camera's working properly, exposure is right, you're in the frame where you want it to be, all that kind of good stuff. So, yeah, if you've got some Minoltas, use them. I'd use those first, unless you really need to deal with a moving subject where you have to maintain focus as they move towards you or away from you. But if you can keep the subject within the depth of field of the lens, then you're good to go with a manual lens. And a lot of the stuff we do as amateurs, you don't really need super duper autofocus. I mean, if I was trying to track my kids around the yard when they were little, they're in their 40s now. When they were little, I'd run around the yard. Yeah, that would be great to have really super duper autofocus, and track them as they run around. But the reality is I could do that with a manual lens. So yeah, you use them. You might find them less frustrating to use than your autofocus lenses. I notice now, I think both Sigma and Panasonic are producing autofocus lenses. They're video specific. So, and they're primes. Fujifilm has 2 very expensive video lenses, but they're manual and they're set. If you've ever seen those big rigs that they use in professional movie shoots, and the guy is turning the wheel to focus or to zoom, it's got the lugs on the camera for iris. They don't call it aperture in movie making, it's an iris. Iris, focus, and zoom are all on these ratchet wheels. So they fit it right in, the lens fits right into the rig, and that's all geared. So when they're doing that, they're just turning a wheel or moving a lever, and everything is moving, right? They turn a knob. And that's why it's so smooth. They can rack focus so beautifully smooth. And when we do it, that's like when I was doing the rack focusing for this thing, this is on the tripod. And I'd already measured it. So I'm just going like this, which is exactly what a focus puller does in a real movie shoot. They're sitting behind it. And they're just going like this, basically, but with their fancy controls. So that's where the manual lens is great. If you wanted to pull focus on something, you can go, he's about 15 feet. Okay, there we go. I just pull focus. I'm not even looking. So that's why I like manual lenses. I know, it's all in the viewfinder and or on the screen. And if you can't see the screen when you're trying to do that, you don't know. You have no way of telling. So that's really the problem when we get into trying to do some of these techniques with still cameras with lenses that are designed for still photography, because we're dealing with issues that you never think about with still photography. So if you one of my objectives for this session was to give you an overview of some of the things to think about when you're trying to buy equipment or use the equipment you already have. If you have a choice of lenses or a choice of camera bodies, which one should you be using for video? Then you'll have a better idea after the session of which to use and what not to use. Any other questions? Well, thank you for putting up with me. It's fun.
Thank you. Good. It's very informative. On behalf of the club, Pete, we'd like to thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much.
So it's,
Wonderful.
thank you.
Thank you.
It was really good, and we'll put the word out and see if people want to
Yeah.
do a workshop. Well,
Yeah.
I think we're thinking maybe sometime in September.
Yes. I've got something coming up in September
Could you tell me?
that I just found out about. So maybe August.
We'll talk
Yeah,
about it.
we'll talk about it. I think right now is I've got a buddy who wants me to visit him in Cape Cod.
Oh.
And for 2 weeks of fishing. So.
I would do that most definitely.
So there is their cable.
Perfect.
I see the people walking to cabinet.
Who's responsible for the cable? It's the handout.
Okay, does someone view them from the table?
Stop the recording. Okay, so